This is a carburetor. I took the bowl off. There's the bowl, the nut for the bowl. This is what I gotta do. This little thing here is called the pin, the needle valve. And then there's this little spring that goes on here. This is the float. I gotta take this pin out of here, take the needle valve out, and then underneath there's a little gasket inside a little cylinder, which this needle valve pushes against to seal off the gas. Well, wish me luck. Okay. In this little hole right here where my thumb is, there was a metal sleeve inserted in there, and beyond that metal sleeve should be a small rubber gasket. The metal sleeve I took out is right here. Beyond that metal sleeve, there was no rubber gasket because it was completely disintegrated. As you can see, here's the new parts. You have the metal sleeve and the rubber gasket. There was no rubber gasket in your carburetor. It completely disintegrated. In order for me to get that metal sleeve out of there, which was pressed in there, here's the old one. I actually had to take a big screw like this and screw it in with a pair of vice grips and yank it out. That's how I got that sleeve out of there. Alright, later I'm going to try and put the new parts in, put the float back on, put the little pin that goes in the float, and then there's a tiny little spring. And if I can get all of that to work, we'll be in business. Okay, I was able to get that little cylinder and the rubber gasket back in the hole. As you can see, looks nice, right? Nice and flush. It has to be pounded in with a punch. This is the punch I used. Just put it on top. You pound in the cylinder. Nice, and just tap it in. Put the rubber gasket at the bottom. In order to get the old one out, I had to use a screw it in, turn it upside down, attach a vice grip to it, and tap it with a hammer, and that tapped it right out. But the screw has to be the right size, and you gotta be a little gentle so you don't damage it. But now there's the little rubber gasket in the bottom. I doubt if you can see it, but there was none when I took the old one out. It totally disintegrated. Earlier I took the main jet out, which is right in the middle, and there's a little slot in there, and you just put a screwdriver in there and unscrew it. The hole was clear. I sprayed it with a little carb cleaner anyway and screwed the main jet right back in. Everything looks good. Hopefully it works. Okay, now I have to install the float and the needle valve in there, and the spring and the pin. Okay, the needle valve goes right in there like that. And the whole thing goes on here, the needle valve going in the hole. The pin goes through. Now this could be a little difficult because it's supposed to be tight. but it slips right through with a little lubricant. That's actually perfect right there. That's how it works. It closes the hole. Now I have to install this little tiny spring. I don't know if you can see it. But it slips over the pin and it gives the float a little bit of boost when it needs to go down. It floats up on the gas, but when it needs to go down, this gives it a little boost. Got the spring on there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of a little meticulous, but it's not too hard to get it on there, especially if the pin moves back and forth. So everything's together on that. Alright, I put this black thing back on. It's good to have a picture of everything the way it went on before. This thing pulls right off and then goes right back on. They don't have any tools involved at all. Just put it back on. Then I've got these new gaskets for the bowl and the 2 screws. Use those to put the bowl back on the bowl nut. And then this is a little drain screw to use when you want to drain it for the winter. You can drain the bowl out, or you can just run the motor. Well, here's the old bowl gasket. See how corroded it is? Here's the new one. It's nice to use new gaskets. You have to make sure you clean the rim of both the carburetor and the bowl so you get a nice clean seal. This rim was all full of crud. You have to clean it. Place the gasket over the top. Make sure it fits snugly. And when you do, then you can put the bowl on. Get a new bowl nut gasket. Use it for the nut that goes in the bottom. Alright, I got the new gasket on. Got the screw in with a new gasket. 14mm wrench. And when you tighten this, you want it snug, but you don't want to over tighten. If you over tighten, you can crush the gasket and warp the bowl. But you don't want it too loose either. So you gotta go by feel. Watch the gasket as you go around. Make sure everything's even. That is snug, but not over tight. Alright, everything's together. This is actually a spacer. It didn't come off, so I left it on there, but it does come off and another gasket goes in between. But since it's nice and snug on there, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to use one gasket to put it back on the snowblower. Notice I put the drain screw on the side of the carburetor that's going to face outward. Otherwise it's pretty useless if you can't reach it when you're trying to drain the bowl. However, you can just run the snowblower till the gas is gone and the bowl will be empty. This is ready to go back on the machine. If you're wondering what the part number is for the carb kit, it's 92-6002, available from Toro. It's the only place I saw it, the cheapest anyway. I think everybody else just reorders from Toro and sells it to you. 92-6002. Alright, as you see, I took all the shrouding off the snowblower to get the carburetor off. The linkages are very simple. The main linkage here, the throttle linkage, you just take it off as you remove the carburetor, and then you put it back on as you install the carburetor, because it's got a little L-shaped hook on the end and a spring. They both go in the same hole. The other simple linkage is simply the choke, which goes right in the hole on the choke as you put the panel back on. Very simple. Carb is ready to go back on. Make sure the surfaces are clean. This is the side that goes onto the motor. Here's the new gasket. I'm going to use a little thread locker on the 2 bolts. This is all it takes. This is the little bolt that goes on the front. 2 bolts, a little thread locker on there because it does vibrate, and a 5mm hexagonal wrench. 5mm. And that's it. Goes right on. As you see, the linkage and the spring go right through the same hole right here. I haven't tightened it up yet. 2 bolts go right in there. This bowl just sits right on top of the carb, probably keeps the splash from going in. Now all I gotta do is tighten it up with the 5mm wrench. Alright, everything's on. Make sure you put the primer bulb thing back on here, and then we'll put the fuel line back on here. That goes there, and we should be good. We'll see if it holds gas now, since everything started out with this carb when gas poured out. There you go. Well, everything's together. I put gas in it. There's nothing dripping. Been waiting here for 10 minutes. No drips yet. So I'm thinking maybe I was successful. I'll try and start it up after I put everything back on it. Alright, I put the bottom part on, and when you put the bottom part on, you got to put the under metal frame for the instrument panel on at the same time. In there is the choke, and off the choke, I don't know if you can see it, but as you put this on, you have to get the choke wire into the choke on the carburetor. Otherwise, there's no other way to do it. You got to do it while you put it on.